Here's Middleton. Giannis trailing the lob. Oh! Run, 2-on-1. Green the finish. Wow, the alley-oop. LeBron turned the corner. Inside! He made Yusuf Nurkic a screensaver. Here comes Murray. Alley-oop to Gordon. Oh, what a play!
All right, joined now by my guy, Brendan Vogt from DNVR Sports. Brendan, thank you so much for tuning in, man. Really appreciate you taking the time. Let's talk about Denver. Let's talk about our home team, the Denver Nuggets. It's an interesting start to the season for them. Not necessarily good, not necessarily bad, but certainly not really expected. 16-9 record to start the year. It's just maybe we should start with that. Like, is this about kind of where you felt that they would be?
I think there was some initial hope that they could hit the ground running and play the way they played coming out of June. And they kind of did before Jamal went down. And I think all of that created an opportunity for a little bit of letdown and disappointment from a fan perspective. Jamal misses some games. You know, they lose the Houston game at home. They don't look great on the road. And it's a little bit of, hey, we want to see these guys at their very best every night. But when you really break down the schedule, the 5 and 7s they've had, the back-to-backs, the competitive road teams they've played, and of course, no Jamal, 16-9 is actually pretty good. I think it bodes well as far as, you know, where they could go from here. But coming off the title, I think Nuggets fans expected maybe their own version of that Warriors team that ultimately lost, but barely lost a game along the way. And it hasn't quite worked out like that.
Yeah, it is interesting. We talked about this when we first chatted before the season began, and I remember the win projections that we kind of went into, and I think had they stayed healthy, had Jamal stayed healthy for this early portion of the season, then they might be even pushing past some of those win projections that we talked about. But it still feels like they are at least tethered to being a good team, not necessarily even a great team right now. They've got the 10th best net rating in the NBA according to Cleaning the Glass. 10th in offense, 12th in defense. The defense number is pretty good, at least for a Nuggets team that usually is about average in defense. But 10th in offense feels a little bit kind of like a regression. Just where do you think that's come from? Are you worried about it being only 10th?
Not too worried right now. If it was the end of the year, I would say, man, that season didn't go well, just looking at that stat alone. For now, I think you can at least, some will call these excuses. I'll call them explanations. I think missing Jamal Murray really matters. I think the grade 3 sprain that Porter allegedly played through to start the year, that's a pretty significant injury. I think that played a pretty large role in him he provides that kind of final layer of eliteness to their offense, and he hasn't always brought that better lately. But, you know, in Jamal's absence, it wasn't enough. And you combine that with some of the way Jokic played lately in the ejection, and you can see it. You can see it. And it's hard to remember now, but around this time last year, we had plenty of questions. More of them were on the defensive side of the ball, but they had yet to evolve into a true contender, I think, around this time. And there was some angst in Denver. So there's plenty of season left. It just, it hasn't clicked on all cylinders so far.
And given that I'm kind of boots on the ground with Denver too, like I've done a little bit of digging on this. The start of the schedule for them has been really, really difficult. They've played the most back-to-backs in the NBA. They've had a pretty tough schedule. It's about to get a lot easier by the looks of things. And the hope is that kind of coincides with a run, and Denver might get into a rhythm at that point. And then that offensive number might look a little bit different. But you mentioned Jamal Murray's absence. It does seem like, hey, he's only played, I think, 11 games so far this year out of 25. I think, given the way that he played in the playoffs last year, that has to be affecting it in some way. Just what does he do, and how has Denver kind of replaced him in those games that he hasn't played?
Excuse me, Ryan. A lot of people think of the scoring with Jamal right away. In Denver, we've been really impressed with his playmaking and the corners he's turned in that regard, really over the years, but particularly in the playoffs last year, especially in the finals. And I thought he brought a lot of that to start the year. Denver doesn't have a lot of ball handling. They don't have point guards on this roster. The KCP trade, which was a grand slam, you do it 100 out of 100 times, they did give up ball handling. That's what they lost in that trade. Monte and Will, guys who could run a pick and roll. They don't have a ton of it. Thank goodness for Reggie Jackson, a much maligned signing. I don't know where they'd be without him. But Murray's pop, the two-man game with Jokic, but also just generally just his playmaking threat and helping other guys find good looks is something they're really missing right now. And the rotation, the way it's affected the bench rotation as well has been well documented.
Yeah, Julian Strawther, nice young rookie for Denver. He has really helped kind of establish that and has done some good things off the bench for this Nuggets team. And like we talked about, Christian Brown, Peyton Watson, some of these other answers that Denver has had to that question of how do you actually replace some of these guys? And it has been hit or miss, I think, to the beginning portion, but it still seems like Denver is working through some of these struggles in a positive way that should be building towards the end of the season, I think.
Yes, and again, man, much like last season, the rotation as far as getting up to 10 guys was a mess, and people didn't have a ton of confidence in it. And by the playoffs, it was 7.5 guys, really, you trusted. Bruce, Christian, and then Jeff, I think, a little bit by default with the size, but also just as a veteran, you could trust to limit the mistakes. And while Bruce and Reggie are very different players, I think thus far they've largely replaced that sixth man aspect with Reggie Jackson. He's been phenomenal. One of those guys, a defender, energy guy, the other more of a bailout bucket getter. But in truth, I think Reggie has provided just as much so far off the bench. And if you had to say to yourself, is there a guy who could give 16 to 20 points off the bench to swing a home game in the playoffs? Reggie's the obvious answer. So they'll miss Bruce, but they still have Christian. They have Reggie. It's kind of that 7.5, 8 spot. I think a lot of people were hopeful it would be Zeke Naji. That's not the case so far. But I think for the most part, as the season goes on, like this stuff will take care of itself. They'll get back to that rotation they trust. I think finding that 8th guy right now is a little hard, but other than that, they're on schedule for the most part.
A couple more things here. Nikola Jokic just got ejected again.
Yes.
And it seems odd the way that this is kind of played out. Just obviously, I'm a little bit partisan in this conversation, and I have seen him kind of be frustrated with some of the ways that he's been reffed over the course of these years, and referees seem to not be giving him the benefit of the doubts. Well, what's going on with the Denver Nuggets and officiating lately? Is this a storyline? Is this just an early season thing? Like, it feels like it's a little bit more than that.
It seems like a storyline, particularly Jokic's relationship with refereeing, which we've watched evolve over the years. And to me, there is, and I shouldn't speak for him, I'm just watching. We get to talk to him, but a lot of it, you're just putting it together from your perspective. But a lot of it is seemingly, hey, we just won. They went 16-4. I've got back-to-back MVPs and a finals MVP. Are we really still doing this? Do I have to start falling over? By the way, there was a night where he fell over a couple times from 3. I think it was last week. And he was getting calls, from 3 and from distance with his jumper. I don't want that as a fan. I don't want to see him start falling everywhere. I would like to see some of these fouls called. It's tough, though, because as much as Jokic may have a point, I think he and LeBron James are probably the least fairly refereed stars in terms of just contact not being called.
Sure.
As much as is as rough, in the past, part of his evolution into like the best player in the world was not letting that stuff get to him. And right now, I think it's clearly a part of his focus. There are some people who believe that's totally fair, and I get that. Whether or not it's fair, it is, I think, what's going on. And it's been a weird subplot to start the year.
It's odd. Like it does feel like if he is the face of the NBA or something close to it at this point, with like 2-time MVP, finals MVP, clearly the best player in the world right now. There has been a weird kind of reticence to whether it's nationally accepting that or if it's just on the court. I have no idea what it is, frankly. I'm not in a great position where I can really answer that question. And it's very fascinating to think about, like, is this going to be something that continues for the rest of his career? Or is this just something like maybe it's the Shaq rules with him where, hey, he's too dominant. he's too dominant. We have to kind of adjust our expectations for that. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, but he seems to have worked himself into this almost boogie kind of space where I think a handful of officials preemptively expect him to give them grief and don't respond well to his grief, and it seems a little cyclical. We're particularly reactive to it right now because last night it's fresh in our minds. It's something that hopefully across 82 we don't talk about too much. And I don't love talking about refereeing a ton, but I do think you can see a noticeable difference between the way Jokic is officiated and some other stars, particularly the guards who flail and the bigs who fall. And it's frustrating, and it's gotten to him for sure.
Yeah, it's he's clearly the only guy who's ever used a bad word before. So we can obviously just move right on past that, I think. What do you think? So this is the storyline through these first 6 weeks, whether it's Murray being down, whether it's Jokic getting into trouble with the referees. What do you think the storyline is going to be in the next 6 weeks between the times when we actually speak?
I'll stick with my theme of let's look at last year. I think this is right around the time when Denver evolves from a team that's finding ways to win some games to, oh yeah, that's in the inner circle of contenders. That's why everyone talks about them the way that we have at the time. Most people do now. They're going to turn into a buzzsaw, a well-oiled machine, I think. And, as Murray works his way back with I think the schedule lightening up in theory on paper, this is a good time for Denver to seize the reins, particularly these home games, which is where they can turn a corner in the standings. And I think we'll see it. I mean, they're too good not to. There are too many plausible explanations for the barriers between them and dominance so far. I don't think they just forgot how to do what they did when they went 16-4. So I expect to see them round into form, man.
We will see what happens. I'm excited for it. This is going to be an interesting run for the defending champions and whether they could really get back to that level, because You use the word buzzsaw there. That's how they were from December to March 3rd last year. So if they can get back to that, then I think a lot of people will be they will understand what it means to have to go through the defending champions again, because like you said, I think Denver's going to turn into a pretty strong team. But he's Brendan Vogt of DNVR Sports. Everybody make sure to go follow his work and follow him on all social media platforms if you do so. Brendan, thank you so much for taking the time, man. Let's talk in 6 weeks, all right?
Anytime, Ryan. Anytime.
All right, joined now by Dane Moore of the Dane Moore NBA Podcast, covering the Minnesota Timberwolves for us here at the Alley Oop. Thank you so much for joining me now, Dane. This has been an incredible run so far for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Just what stands out so far for a team that's now 17-5 somehow?
Yeah, just that it's way easier. It's way easier to cover. I mean, you've experienced that, right, with Denver, where it kind of shifts from your more futuristic thinking okay, what is here on this team that will be on the next version of the really good version of this team. That's been so much of my career covering the Timberwolves is what here can sustain and grow. And now it's shifting into this, what do they have now, right? And how good can this be now? What can get marginally better now? What has potential for regression? And it's a fun, different sort of task, I think, in covering the team or for the fans who are watching the team. As again, I'm sure you guys kind of experienced with Denver when the goal or the objective kind of evolves based on the quality of the team.
Yeah, and you start to see it pretty early, right? Where you get into this portion of the season, and a lot of it is about familiarizing yourself with what the group is going to be like. And because we talked about the expectations for this group as, hey, they could upset somebody in the first round. They could make the playoff series. They could win a playoff series. They could be a playoff team, things like that. We're now past that. That conversation, it seems, at least at this stage, is kind of over. I know that the West has been a little bit down initially, but the T-Wolves have earned their spot at the top of the West so far. 4th best point differential, 16th on offense, but first by a long margin on defense in a lot of ways. Is this just a little bit more of what you expected from the group, or like just a little bit better? Or where are some of the areas that you think you like hit on with this group, and where are some of them you think that you missed on your initial evaluation?
Yeah, I think where I missed on the evaluation ones is probably the more interesting, right? Because it's what's happened that we didn't expect. And the main thing there is the defense being elite, and the impact Rudy directly has on that. It's an interesting experience covering Rudy and watching him every single day in comparison to, what we do when we watch other teams that we don't directly cover, where you're seeing him here and there, right? You may be catching 10 games over the course of the season or something like that. And to appreciate Rudy Gobert is to watch him every day and understand what he does consistently and how he changes the ways in which an opponent wants to play against you. The frequency of the shots just not even being attempted by opponents at the rim has really popped this year. That's a major difference from last season when Rudy didn't have that same level of rim deterrence. And just seeing that day to day and understanding that that level of defense even exists for him or for this team, it totally changes your perspective on a team that is, like you said, 16th in offense. They're a mediocre offensive team that probably can get a little bit better than that.
Sure.
But I don't think this is, ever going to be a top 7, 8 offensive team. They kind of need this defense, I feel like, to be able to navigate some of their offensive shortcomings or some of the asymmetries in their roster construction that hold back the offense a little bit. So I miss the defense and specifically what Rudy could do in that and how others around him are really empowering him or just they're selling out on the perimeter, man. And it's hectic and difficult to get clean shots off against this team, not just at the rim, but on the perimeter too, because they're just like, dial it up and run these guys off the line, rear view contest, whatever, send them to Rudy. And they very much bought into that. And the pursuit of when they're playing defense is really pretty incredible because it forces the other team to take difficult shots, scramble a little bit offensively, only with the end result of getting to the rim where Rudy is for 35 minutes a night. It's fun to cover a really good defensive team because you're watching these things and you're seeing them night and night sustain. It's been fun, but I definitely missed that. Maybe I shouldn't have. They were 8th in defense last year. We probably should have assumed maybe it was going to get a little bit better, but I don't know. Number 1, I wasn't expecting that.
There is a level of, I guess, seriousness that comes with that, where you saw the team get a taste of it last year, and what really kind of changes when you get the first taste of that action and you want to improve upon it. You see what you've did well, but then you can see those little margins that you can improve, and it just feels like they've tightened up on a lot of those margins. Anthony Edwards has become a better defender. Karl Anthony Towns has become a better defender. Mike Conley is in there more consistently than a D'Angelo Russell was for half of the year last year, and you could start to see the impact, even though Mike isn't like an elite defender anymore. He's still somebody who's functional within that. And then like the Jaden McDaniels is like, he's been out for a little bit here, but Nickeil Alexander-Walker's awesome. Kyle Anderson is smart. Naz Reid is awesome. Like these guys are just really, really great pieces. And it all surrounds what I think is the defensive player of the year. And that's a completely understandable take at this point, where you've got a team that's number 1 in defense, and he is a proof of concept on how that works. You mentioned him being like seeing that from afar and not necessarily seeing it up close all the time. Like we saw it. We're in the same division as the Utah Jazz for 8, 9, 10 years that he was over there. And now you see him up close, and I can understand how the perspective can change. But Denver not super.
Last year was bad. Last year he wasn't doing this. Like that's what it is too. So it's like you didn't live the Utah experience day to day, and you weren't seeing it day to day. And then he comes here, and it's just good, So you didn't even understand what the ceiling. I would have needed to have been watching Utah, the majority of their games in 2021 or whatever, to have been able to be like, oh yeah, this maybe can be copy and pasted onto it. I would have been skeptical that it could have been, he's in his 30s now, that even could exist, but it can exist. It is happening. It's happened for the first quarter of the season, where he's been legitimately great in probably 18, 19 of the 22 games. And that's an interesting thing too, where it's like, how many, even the best offensive players, right, in the league, how many games are they great offensively for? It's not 90% of the games. And that's a unique thing to Rudy. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can be great defensively 90% of the games if you're a great defensive player. I don't know, like, what percentage of the games can you be great if you're the best offensive player in the league? 80? 75? There's a difference there. And I'm growing in appreciation for that and the consistency of Rudy too. And so, I don't know who, is it Anthony Davis? Who are the other cases for Defensive Player of the Year right now?
Oh, I don't even have any. I think that it's Rudy at this point, and he has raised the floor to such a level for this team for where it was last year, where things were not in a great place, and a lot of that had to do with the offense for sure, but it just does feel like he has provided some stability for the group in a lot of different ways. And there's very few players in the NBA that can even compare to that. So he gets a ton of credit from me.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I'm curious. I'm just thinking about this right now, and I think Denver experienced the other side of this for the past 3-4 years or whatever. Like you said, Wolves are average, slightly below average offensive team, and so are the Orlando Magic and the Houston Rockets, and they're the second and third best defensive teams in the league right now. And I'm starting to think about this, dichotomy, right, of being elite on one side of the floor and average on the other, and trying to be able to make that work to be one of the very best teams in the league. Like, average and number one is good, but I think in Minnesota we've now started shifting our perspective into, can this be a good team, into now, can it be a great team? And I think the question is, can you be average on one side of the ball and elite on the other and still be a great team? Denver's a good example of that in the inverse in recent seasons. How did you approach that at the time? And were you skeptical? Did you believe the elite offense could carry them through? And are those even apples to apples comparisons?
No,
with one being offense versus defense. You know what I'm saying?
Of course. No, I think it's a very fair comparison, if only the inverse of it. And from Denver's perspective, there were a couple of indicators that they could be a strong defensive team when they wanted to be. But playing defense throughout the regular season is hard. And it's why I have respect for teams like Minnesota and Houston and Orlando and teams like that that have made that their identity and turned it into something special. Yeah. I think on the offensive end, again, and maybe this is for Minnesota, they have to be able to solve problems on the offensive end. And when defense, when defenses kind of figure out how to funnel Anthony Edwards into their help, how to help off of Rudy Gobert in ways where he doesn't just get lobs at the rim, where if they're getting up and getting physical into Karl Anthony Towns with a guy that can guard him like an Aaron Gordon briefly last year in the playoffs. Yep. So there are things that Minnesota, I think, is still going to have to answer on the offensive end, much in the way that Denver had to answer on the defensive end. How do you keep Jokic out of the pick and roll and out of space a lot of the time? How do you make those passes more difficult around him? What are the ways that you can force tougher shots rather than just give up the easy ones? Denver had to go through all of those steps last year. And when they were in the clutch specifically, they were really good defensively. And I don't, it's such a small sample size.
On the offensive side, I mean, again, in 22 games or whatever, it's kind of been that too, which maybe gives you a little more belief in the offense. Like, if you're overall an average offensive team, but in the clutch, you can be relied upon to be a top 10, top 5 offensive team. I haven't looked it up recently, but when I did, a week ago, they were there. I think the Wolves could get that because in the clutch, Anthony Edwards is going to be on the floor. And they are going to function at that level broadly when Anthony Edwards is on the floor. And this is just because it's most recently on my mind, Ant didn't play when the Wolves played the Pelicans on Monday in their last game before recording this, and it's no Ant for 48 minutes, and now it's 48 minutes of Wolves offense with no Anthony Edwards, and that is what I think is contributing to this mediocrity of the offense as a whole. And know it's only like on average maybe 15 minutes a night. Again, this is kind of similar to the Jokic thing, right? Where it's like, can you survive offensively when your offensive fulcrum is off the floor? And I think people look at the Wolves and they go, you got Cat, right? Play through him. He's an elite offensive player. The problem, again, that we saw in the Pelicans game was they did the Aaron Gordon thing. They guarded Cat with Herb Jones and they brought doubles. And that has been for a while now difficult for Karl to solve. Not even just because of initially he had to get comfortable with that, and he's still getting comfortable with it. But the issue in that game was they're bringing those doubles. Karl's passing out of them, but to who? There isn't shooting around. They're playing a lot of lineups with like 2-3 non-shooters out there. They're playing like sometimes Kyle Anderson, Shake Milton, and Rudy Gobert all on the floor. Like if that's out there and Karl's getting doubled in the post, like what are you really going to find, Right. And so I'm a little at the moment, a little hyper fixated on broadly. This team is mediocre offensively. And that is a product of when Anthony Edwards isn't on the floor. I think they need to find improvements there to be able to overall improve the offense, but also in the playoffs, 10, 12 minutes a night, you're going to need to live without Anthony Edwards, too.
And that's what I was going to say, though, is like the good thing about the playoffs is that 15 minutes a night that you're supposed to survive without. I mean, it kind of just turns to 6 to 10 in a lot of ways. And there are, Jokic, and one of the things that people struggle to appreciate about him is that he can play 40 minutes a night in the playoffs, no issue. Like that, that is, and his 40th minute is going to be 90% as good as his first minute, and that's a pretty strongly conditioned athlete. And I think Anthony Edwards, we talked about this a little bit about last year, didn't approach the conditioning as well at the beginning, seems to have taken that very seriously and seems to be in a really good place where, hey, the heavy burden, the heavy minutes toll that's going to happen in the playoffs, he seems like he's ready for that and that he's graduated to that. So I tend to think
playoffs, I don't know, night to night in the regular season, like we'll see.
Sure.
It's also the factor of how much defensive responsibility does Ant have when we're talking about that 40-minute. I'm thinking about difficult opponents right now in the playoffs. I'm like, okay, like Phoenix. So you want to play Ant for 40 minutes in that game, but he's guarding in those 40 minutes one of probably Beal, Durant, or Booker,
Right.
And that becomes a tenuous defensive responsibility with a lot of offensive legwork to do there as well. I'm nitpicking at a 17-5 team, but maybe this is indicative of where I'm at in my head with it. Is like I've graduated from like I think I said with you when we were doing predictions at the beginning of the season, like 5th seed, 47 wins. Like I'm above that, and I'm testing night to night like the feasibility of my belief that this is a 2nd seed, 1st seed, maybe low to mid 50 wins team. And these are the questions, the nitpicks that they have to answer to clear that bar, at least in my mind.
No, it's a fair step in the right direction for this group. And how fun is that you get to be able to even entertain that as a possibility? And I think that Minnesota's in a really good place, and it is very cool to see them be able to handle that. Just really quickly, we'll wrap up with the schedule here. The schedule has been kind to Minnesota at the initial outset. That you and I were talking briefly. This next run that they're about to go on, these next 16 games or so, are going to be difficult. Just what are you looking for in that stretch? What are you looking for from this group kind of improving their salt?
I'm interested to see how they bounce back, right? Like you said, starting with the Pelicans game on Monday, they have 16 straight games against teams that are currently 500 or better. 11 of those 16 games are on the road. And in that, at some point, they're probably going to lose 2 or 3 or 4 games in a row. They haven't done that this year. They haven't lost consecutive games even this year. And that's an interesting test, I think, for a team that's already tasted success, right? What happens when that gets taken away? What is your ability to bounce back and restabilize off of that? And they're missing Ant in the Pelicans game, but who knows? Maybe these next few games they lose. Maybe they go like 1-4 in the next 5 games. Okay, whatever. You're still 18-8 or whatever, and really you're in a great spot. But can you internalize that mentally and get back and go in the next 5 games and win 3 or 4 or 5 of them? I'm very curious to see that with this group. Also, because the group's getting back to full strength. You mentioned Jaden being out. What can he give this team? They've been the number 1 defense. Jaden McDaniels has played like a third of the minutes this season.
Wild.
And he's the second best defensive player on the team, one of the best perimeter defenders in the entire NBA. So there's actually reason to believe they could be playing at a higher overall level over this next stretch of games, more difficult opponents. But that's what this team needs right now. I feel that they kind of, just because they won 16 of 18 games, that you hit some of that natural coasting vibe. What happens when you get punched, when you're coasting? Do you get back up and be able to do that? And with a team that has not had a lot of regular season or sustained success, that's at least somewhat of a question. I believe so much more in the continuity and confidence and camaraderie of this group that I believe in their ability to, one, probably not let a 3 or 4 game losing streak happen. But even if it does, because they're in a different place, Rudy in particular is in such a different place mentally, it seems. I struggle to picture this team sustaining an extended poor stretch, and that's, I think that's a testament to Chris Finch and getting this group to enable that identity, right? That's not just defense, but professional. And they're just a team that they're not going to rest guys, man. They're going to it's why they're a good, I don't know if you can live bet season win total over unders. I'd take the Wolves over because they're not going to rest guys. They're going to go here. This team is all in on this year. We've talked about it before. Whole bunch of tax and roster sort of things. I know they were the 8th seed last year and got bounced by the Nuggets, but this is a team who views themselves as many levels above that, and should. They should.
Yeah,
agreed. The circumstances indicate that. Rudy is still at his peak, but won't be forever. The roster's going to change in the future, probably have to. So let's go now. And I'm really impressed by that. Feels like the ethos of this group. So let's see what happens in this difficult stretch.
We will see what happens with them. I'm looking forward to seeing how they respond to this tougher stretch. But he is Dane Moore of the Dane Moore NBA Podcast. Thank you so much, Dane, for hopping on. Really appreciate you taking the time. Let's talk in 6 weeks, all right?
Yes, sir, man. Thank you.
All right, joined by David Brandon, writing for Daily Thunder, covering the OKC Thunder here at the Alley-Oop. David, thank you so much for hopping on, man. Really appreciate you taking the time. Let's chat about one of the best stories in the NBA so far. The team that is 3rd in the NBA net rating, according to Cleaning the Glass, the OKC Thunder. Where do we even start on this team? This team has been unbelievable in how they have sort of had this renaissance. It's gone a lot faster than I think a lot of people expected in terms of the rebuild. The team has thoroughly outperformed expectations so far because of what?
I think the biggest thing this year is the emergence of Chet Holmgren. Holmgren has been awesome this year. He's been playing at what I would call an all-NBA level as a rookie.
Wow.
Which is, I haven't looked in a minute, but he was having a 50-40-90 season and is putting up, I think, over a block and a steal per game. I know he's putting up over a block per game. I think he might be putting up 2. I don't have those stats off the top of my head, but it's obscene.
I've got the numbers here. For you. 17 points, 7.8 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 2.4 blocks. He's off pace on the steals at 0.9, but he's very close there. 52 from the field, 38 from 3, 88 from the line. That's nuts. That's frankly ridiculous, and people should be afraid.
Yeah. I expected him to be good. I don't think anyone expected him to be this good this fast. The rebounding's still an issue team-wide, but it hasn't been enough of an issue to pull them off pace so far. It's despite them getting absolutely brutalized on the glass in a lot of games, they're still killing it in so many other areas that it hasn't been an issue. And Holmgren's a big part of that, because having him on the back line lets the guys be loose and comfortable on defense. Shea's playing the best defense of his career. I would argue that Shea's playing like all defense, team level defense right now. He's been incredibly good on that. And Dort is obviously going to give you what he's going to give you on that end. J-Dub is a great defender. It starts with the defense. And on the offensive side, it starts with Shea. And then everybody else on the floor just being more efficient. Dort has been good this year, but not. He's kind of fallen off a little bit. He had a real hot start. I think some guys are going to come down to earth and some guys are going to pop. But generally speaking, it's Shea has been even better, and Holmgren has shored up the defense to a point where they don't have to worry about that end.
Yeah, just going through some of the numbers here is pretty nuts to think about. The team's on cleaning the glass, 6th on offense, 6th on defense. They are, like I said, 3rd in the NBA net rating at plus 8.3, which would lead the NBA in some years. I think it would have led it last year, if I'm not mistaken. You mentioned the numbers for Shea. Some crazy stuff here. 2.8 steals per game. It's been a long time since we've ever really seen that before. And steals aren't everything, but he's also averaging 0.9 blocks, and the team is 6th in defense, and they're really feeding off of that perimeter contain. So he's been unbelievable, and shooting 55% from the field is disgusting as a perimeter player with where he takes his shots. That's flat out ridiculous. He has, and I just did a show, I think a week ago or so, with Matt Moore on MVP candidates. Jokic was leading at that point, but he has fallen down in a lot of ways. And I think you could absolutely make an argument that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's been the MVP of the league. He's definitely,
MVP conversation, as well as I do with the award conversations, that a lot of that comes down to legacy too, or sure. Voter fatigue in some cases will let guys get in that wouldn't get another look in. There's different factors that go into that. But I would say Shai should be in people's top 5s this year. I'm not going to say where he should be. I think he should be I would say top 3 if he continues on this pace all year and the Thunder perform well. You could make an argument for MVP, but yeah, it's been, there's at least 5 or 6 moments, I think, every game where I'm watching and he does something and I'm I just shake my head. I'm I don't know how he did that. I don't know how that's possible. And I remember that's the feeling I got watching Kevin Durant. That's the feeling I got watching Russell Westbrook, and being able to see that again, it's special. We're fortunate as fans.
Yeah, being able to go from the Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook era to, hey, you have a little bit of a downturn, but you still get to watch this amazing dynamo of a creator on the offensive end. The balance that he has and the touch that he has is it is reaching insano levels. So he deserves to be in everybody's top 3. So you've got a top 3 NBA player so far this year. You have a top 15 guy if you're doing the all NBA caliber thing with Chet. He's been unbelievable, especially as a stretch 5. It's just very rare to see him. And you see a guy like that average more than 2 blocks per game. That is a unicorn. Yeah. And then you also have a team that is leading the NBA right now in 3-point percentage at 39.1%. They are, I think, leading the NBA the last time I checked at free throw percentage, which that certainly helps too. This team is an elite shooting team, and it's funny to think about them that way after so many years of, the missing piece was shooting. What has the change been? Where does that come from?
Honestly, I think it'll come back down to earth a little bit. Some of that's fueled by Dort had an incredibly hot start to the year. I do think that's already starting to fall back down to earth a little. Isaiah Joe is great. Isaiah Joe's getting minutes. Yeah. There's several guys on the team that are just shooting really well from 3. Chet taking more threes helps. There's been a shift from personnel who aren't great shooters to personnel who are better shooters. Getting more minutes, I think, is part of it. And then the guys that you want taking the threes are taking the threes. And then
Sure.
you also have there's decreased offensive responsibility, which is why I think Dort had a good start. Because he's not being forced into a bigger role than he should have. There's guys probably improving in the off season. I mean, I bet you can chalk at least some of this up to improvement from working with Chip England and some of the shooting coaches. But yeah, I mean, I expect it to fall down a little bit. I'm gun shy. I've just spent so many years like watching this team brick that I won't be convinced of it till I see it for a season. But I'm enjoying the ride.
Yeah, and like that's part of the process is hey, you go through hot shooting starts, you go through hot shooting spells, and then the other coin is probably going to drop at some point. But we've talked about OKC as a team that has immense young talent, and they've tried to build out their perimeter as much as possible. And you've got a stretch five, and you've got all these different elements. And if Shea is going to keep creating awesome shots, Josh Giddey, who I mean, I don't really feel like talking about that situation at all personally, but like he's going to keep creating good shots for other people too. And J-Dub continues to level up as well. Like there's just a lot of reasons to be excited about the trajectory of this team and where they're continuing to go. Who are some other guys on the team that we haven't mentioned really so far that everybody needs to be knowing about if they're checking in with the Thunder?
Kenrich Williams. He's a huge X factor for them. Like his stat line doesn't pop or anything like that, but they're a better team when he's on the floor. Last I checked, he and Chet were among the better pairings on the team in terms of front lines. If you were playing Kenrich at the 4 and Chet at the 5, he's just a guy who does a lot of little stuff. He's a hustle dude. The rebounding's better when he's out there. He makes things happen. That's a guy. I mean, I think every team should want a Kenrich Williams on their team. He's one. Isaiah Joe, we already mentioned. Outside of the main guys, Cason Wallace has been incredible. He's not being asked to do a ton, but what he's doing, he's done really, really well. He's been part of the hot shooting start of Cason Wallace just going absolutely out of his mind.
I'm looking at the numbers right here. He's 59% from the field as a point guard and 52% from three. Like,
yeah,
what are we even talking about here? That's bonkers.
He looks like he's probably the heir apparent to Dort in terms of like position and defense. Like, he plays great defense. He was tasked with Curry some. I've seen him guard Curry a bit. I think I've seen him guard Clay. There's a few. He's asked to guard tough covers, and he's been doing well. And he's been absolutely shooting the leather off the ball on the other end. So he's a guy that I don't know how big his role is going to be. I don't know how much he can do. With Kentucky guards, it's like a surprise package. You open the box and you never know what you're going to get. You just know it's going to be good.
That's awesome.
So he's been really great. Backup point guard. There's been a little bit of a rotation of guys. It's not really. I don't know who exactly is settling in that spot long term. Mishik. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, said that his conditioning wasn't up to it when he started the year. Zach Lowe says they signed him just to trade. But yeah, backup point guard, I'm not really sure who winds up doing that. I think they could use to firm up that spot. But, I mean, they're playing some where J-Dub is doing backup point guard stuff and staggering rotations. It's just Giddey, some as backup point, like where they do not hockey subs, but kind of rotate through. But yeah, as far as like bench guys go, I think Wallace and Williams are the two that I would. The Kenrich, not other Jalen.
Sure. Yeah. There's Jalen and J-Dub and just everything under the sun with the OKC Thunder and the Williams crew. And yeah, just got a lot of Williamses over here. Okay, so. Last couple questions here. I didn't expect Chet to be this good this fast. I don't think, like we talked about, I don't think anybody really expected it to be this good. has the way that the season has started for OKC kind of shifted your expectations at all? I remember us talking and having, like, I was maybe a little bit more on the muted side of, hey, this team could be good, we'll see what happens. And you're still pretty excited about where they could go from here. They might have even surpassed that at this point. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, has that shifted your expectations for this season in particular?
It has. I think this team, presuming they play as they have been, it's a playoff lock. And I would be disappointed if they don't make it through the first round at least. Like, this team is good. I also, like, I said like 40 something. I think I might have said 45 wins. I think we'll get over that pretty comfortably. It's just one of those things. Part of it was like, I thought the West to be better than it is. There's some teams that have just kind of dropped off. Golden State's, like, some of their guys that I thought would perform just haven't. There's been a few other teams that have just, like, not done what I thought they would do. Clippers have not been as good as I thought, and there's a few like that where I thought the West was going to beat up on each other a lot more and drive those numbers down. I think they get in the 50s. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. But I'm excited.
Does that maybe change your opinions? Because I know OKC has been very patient when it comes to, like, the trade market and things like that. Does that change your opinion on how aggressive you'd want to be, given, hey, maybe the team is ready to win in the playoffs in this way? Like, does that change your impressions of how aggressive they might want to be?
I mean, I would be probably a little bit more aggressive at this point than Sam Presti, just given the rhetoric that he had about the team coming into the season. But, I mean, I don't know. It might be something where, like, his mind's changed by the way that they're playing. I mean, I would definitely, if you were going to do something, aside from any off-the-court stuff, Josh Giddey's been the weak link. Just if you look at lineup numbers and that sort of thing, like, he's got to pick up the pace, or I don't think they even pick up his option, maybe.
Wow.
You know, I don't know, the raw numbers aren't bad, but he's been, like, his units don't perform well. And that net rating would be higher with, I think, a lot of players in that spot right now. So if they wanted to shore up a spot, it would be that starting wing. You know, and maybe you start sniffing around some of the guys that might be available. I saw a report. I know the Spurs have some guys that they might be trying to move. Toronto, who knows what they'll do? Probably nothing. Yeah, but there's going to be a few guys on the market, and I do wonder if they might kind of kick the tires more than they would on somebody. You know, maybe you do kick the tires on, like, an OG Anunoby or somebody, just to see what's there. You know, maybe you do sniff around, I don't know, Indiana, and see, hey, can we pry a guy or two loose, and maybe we can send you some people that can help your defense. Maybe you sniff around Chicago and you say, hey, like, that Patrick Williams thing that was rumored a while ago, you still interested in that? Because you're going nowhere right now.
Sure.
You know, maybe that's something that happens. I would bet there are discussions taking place, but I don't know if anything will happen.
Well, we will see what happens. He is David Brandon, covering the Thunder for Daily Thunder. Brandon, David, thank you so much for taking the time with me, man. Let's chat in 6 weeks, all right?
Sounds good. Thanks.
All right, joined here by Danny Marang. He's the host of the Jack Ramsey's pod and our correspondent for the Portland Trailblazers. Really appreciate your time, Danny. Thanks for hopping on with me. Let's talk Portland. Let's talk a team that they're 6-16 right now. I think we talked about tempered expectations in our first initial discussion, and I think that's really borne out. The pressure's kind of off, and I think it's probably a better place to be with than rather like just trying to stress out the end of the Dame era.
Yeah, there's been a few injuries. Obviously, Scoot Henderson picked up a knock. Jeremy Grant is currently in concussion protocol. He's going to be out for another game at least. Malcolm Brogdon had a sore knee. He was put out of action for 2 weeks. DeAndre Ayton's had a little bit of a knee issue. He's out. He probably is going to come back tomorrow night. And then Time Lord Robert Williams III tore his knee. He's obviously out for the season. That's also been another kind of thing to overcome. And Anthony Simons tore the right ligament, or the ligament in his right thumb in the first half of game 1 of the season. So they Yeah, they just got him back 3 games ago. So the fact that they're 6-16 is probably impressive considering they're not looking like the Pistons or the Wizards or the Spurs in that vein. One of the things that I've heard from rival coaches and executives and players all alike is that this team is a tough out. They are a young team that they are taking on an identity that the Blazers have hoped would come along with Chauncey Billups since he got here 2.5 years ago. And it's that they're tough, they're focused, and they play with kind of a nastiness. Like you look at you see the Trailblazers on the schedule and you go, young team. We're going to get in there and get out. It'll be no problem. You're going to get a win, but you're going to lose a pound of flesh here. Like that's kind of the goal right now is like they want you to come in here and go, oh God, we got to go all the way the hell out there, go to Nike for the day and then fight with this ornery little team of 20-year-olds. Great. Like, because it's either the beginning or the end of a trip. So it's how it always works. So you're just like, you're either getting in fresh and you're like, I'm going to spend a day at Nike. Maybe it'll be pouring down rain. And like, oh, this onslaught of 20-year-olds, it's going to full court press us for 48 minutes. Awesome. So it's been, if nothing, entertaining to say the least.
That's good to hear. And like when you change expectations, obviously, from a team that like had been a perennial playoff contender to a team where you just never know how the fan base is going to respond to that kind of change, what it's going to be like. We've talked about the pressure kind of being off and how teams have handled it. It seems like they've handled it better than some other teams. They're not one of the teams that's at the bottom of the pecking order in terms of, oh man, we love to see Washington on the schedule. Like, I mean, Joel Embiid has played Washington and Detroit every single night of his career.
30 and 10 and a half.
Yeah, it's wild. Now those teams are struggling, and San Antonio probably in that category as well. But with Portland, like even just having some veterans, some guys that could really stabilize things and help direct the young guys probably helps. How has maybe Malcolm Brogdon, DeAndre Ayton, guys like that, Jeremy Grant even, how have they helped in that regard?
There's been massive stabilizing forces. The entire offense was supposed to be predicated on Simons and DA pick and rolls, DeAndre Ayton pick and rolls. Simons goes down in the first half. He played in the second half. In the third quarter, he came out at halftime, and it was one of those situations where he tried to kind of play through it because just, he thinks, oh, it's a little bit sore. Got kind of a hyperextended. Turned out he tore the ulnar collateral ligament in his thumb. And
nice.
Missed every shot he took after that. So it was like, wow, it's crazy. Because I think it was 7 of 8. And he had one of those, Denver knows exactly what Anthony Simons can do.
Yeah, we know exactly, especially early in the season where you're not prepared to get out there onto the perimeter. And he's like, oh, crap, you've got 30 points on 8 shots somehow.
Yeah, and he was having one of those. His first quarter was a little bit rough. His second quarter, I think he went 7 for 7 or 7 for 8, and he had like 19 and a half. And you're like, 19-point quarter, first game of the season. Here we go. He's gonna start right here because it's as much as it's Scoot Henderson's team, as far as like the number 3 overall draft pick, it's Anthony Simons' team. He's the best player on the team. He's the guy who was going to kind of lead them into the season. And with him falling off with the injury, it was like, okay, now what? Because Scoot was very clearly and is clearly not ready to handle that. So the veterans like Malcolm Brogdon, I mean, the man was 6th man of the year for a reason. He could start for just about any team in the league. That's just he's an incredibly professional, good point guard. He doesn't have this otherworldly quickness or shiftiness, or it's veteran savvy. I'm going to go here, and there's nothing you can do about it. And it's truly incredible to watch. He's never going left. If he goes left, it's so he can come back right. He's never going left, ever. And yet, it's like the anti-Isaiah Thomas, where Isaiah Thomas would always go left.
Sure.
It's the same thing with Brog. Like, I may hezzy tween, but I'm going right. I'm going to put my big meaty shoulder in your chest, and then I'm going to turn the corner, and then I'm just going to kind of trot to the rim and somehow get a layup. And you're just like, how the hell did he do that? But he did that to the tune of basically like 19, 6 and 6, just night after night after night. It wasn't leading to a lot of wins because, they were still playing Scoot, 35 minutes a night and not quite ready for that minutes load. Jeremy Grant started out really rough first 2 or 3 games of the season because he went from like kind of a quasi supporting role to please carry the offense. And then Jeremy basically went for 2 weeks as like one of the 3 best players in the league. which was kind of crazy. He I want to say it was the first 8 games of the season. He improved his points per game every game because he had a really bad opening night. It was like 12 points on poor shooting, and then it was 17, then it was 18, then it was 21, then it was 22, then 25, then 27, then 29, then 34, and you're like, it's getting better and more efficient, more efficient. They just kind of kept going and going and going. I think he had like a 39-point night. Nice. And you look at the efficiency, all of a sudden he was shooting like, 46% from 3, and you're like, and he was rebounding, which, he doesn't do. So it was like,
it's very rare. Yeah.
So I was like, oh man, Jeremy's had like 34, 7, and 5. Oh, okay. Like, where did that come from? DeAndre Ayton, unfortunately, suffered the biggest setback. Without shooting, particularly Anthony Simons' gravity outside, teams just pack the paint. And DA is a guy who doesn't typically get all the way to the rim. He settles, quote unquote, for that, mid-paint pull-up. But I don't know if I necessarily call it settling when you're the second best shooter to Jokic at that shot in the entire league. Like if you look at all of the metrics, it's Jokic who hits it at an obscene rate, and then a slightly less obscene rate. Hey, DeAndre Ayton right there. So it's one of those things where you're like, I wish he got all the way to the rim, but he does shoot 60% there, so it's kind of okay.
Sure.
But there was just almost nowhere for him to work. The space was non-existent. The paint was packed. The timing was off because of the additions of DA and Brogdon to the team. It was really late into the training camp process and into I should say pre-training camp. It was basically in training camp that the deal happens. I think it was a day before camp open is when they got there. So the timing, the rhythm, everything else fell apart. But the veterans were just a huge, huge, huge addition to, I don't know, a level of professionalism that was just you don't typically see in these kind of teams, and yet they still suck enough to make sure that their lottery pick is very much protected. It's a perfect balance, to be honest.
It really is. I mean, that's if you're the general manager of the Portland Trailblazers, you're thinking, okay, this is exactly how it should go. Kind of a roundabout way, and you'd never want an injury to kind of facilitate that. And actually, there are a couple of injuries that I think have kind of facilitated the way that this needs to go for Portland, which is, hey, got to bring Scoot Henderson off the bench. Got to slow play it a little bit. Got to make sure that he's ready to go at his own pace and not have the burden of the entire franchise on him. You talked about him starting pretty slow. Can you give us an update on where he's been since he's gotten back from the injury?
Yeah, the big thing for him was just everything slowing down and figure out what he was going to be able to do that was productive on the floor night in, night out. And I know that sounds weird, but I have been banging this drum since the minute he was drafted. 19-year-old rookie point guards suck. Full stop.
It's universal.
Denver should know. Emmanuel Mudiay was one of them. He was a dumpster fire. He was terrible. There were 3 19-year-old rookie point guards in NBA history who were remotely good. Kyrie Irving, LaMelo Ball, Stephon Marbury. And think about those 3 guys real quick. Kyrie Irving has, I don't even think it's arguable, the best handles in NBA history. He's also a 50-40-90 shooter.
Yeah.
He had 2 things that day one, he was better than damn near everyone at. And it still didn't mean a thing. That Cavs team sucked.
They were not good.
Stephon Marbury could get wherever he wanted on the floor. Lightning quickness. Uber athleticism. LaMelo Ball's a 6'8" passing savant who could shoot out to 35 feet. What is the thing that Scoot does day one that you're like, yep, that's it? And it's get into the paint and spray passes. Well, if you don't have a ton of shooting and teams are packing the paint on you and you don't have an understanding of how NBA pick and rolls work because you're 19 and you played in the G League where it's like,
sometimes pick and roll.
Yeah. it's just gonna take a while because you need to learn angles, you need to learn pacing, you need to learn how to change gears, you need to learn how to finish over NBA shot blockers. Huge white European bigs have been the bane of his existence. It has been, whether it's been Nurkic, whether it's been Pirtle, I mean, you name a Zubac, you name a huge white dude in the league, they have gobbled him up at the rim because he's just not used to seeing 7'1", 285-pound monsters go, this is mine.
Sure.
So he's learning all these little things. The shooting is still, he had his best game of his young career, 19, 6, and 4 last game. And the big difference is the shot going in. But even more than that, he kind of knew what he wanted to do on a given possession. After the game, this isn't like real math, but I said, this is kind of like the 85-15 principle of like 85% of the time, he knew what he wanted to do, which for a rookie, hey, 2 thumbs up.
Sure.
We go with that. We go with that. Okay.
That's a very fair breakdown. And like, it's never going to be 100, especially at this stage. He hasn't seen every defense. He hasn't seen like even half of what defenses can really start to do when they really start to lock in. And like, this
Damian Lillard told me it took him until year 4. This is a guy who ran a pick and roll offense in college for 4 years.
Right.
Who ran 8,000 pick and rolls before he even got to the league. And then it took him another 12,000 more pick and rolls before he got there.
It's going to take time.
It's going to be a minute.
Yeah. And I know that's what Portland signed up for. That's what that's what they're hoping for. And it's good that they had the pressure taken off, especially for that reason. 2 guys I want to ask you about, Shaedon Sharpe and Toumani Camara.
Ooh, buddy.
Shaedon Sharpe, like fun second-year player who is now starting to really figure some things out.
Yep.
And then my question that I have listed here, I know who he is, but for the audience, who the heck is Toumani Camara and why did Blazers fans care so much?
Yeah, so Shaedon is taking another step forward, and the big thing for him has been, Anthony Simons has come back. The last 3 games, he's averaging 25, 6, and 5 on 50, 40. I think I want to say it's 50, 40, 75 splits. Free throw line's a little bit iffy. He's about an 80% free throw shooter, which is weird because he can shoot the living hell out of the ball from 3.
Sure.
But he is a guy who is a bit of a throwback. He's more of a traditional 2 guard. Where he comes off ball, he plays off pin downs. He's not JJ Redick. Don't get it twisted. He's not running all over the floor, but they're running like little pet actions for him to attack a defense that's not set. And I don't know if you saw it the other night. Occasionally, he gets a chance to attack by himself, run a quick little pick and roll, get a switch, and then send Daniel Tice to the nether realm with a step back that sent him just spiraling out of control. He's got a nice little hezzy tween hang dribble kind of thing. Like, don't get it twisted. Simons' bag is galaxies beyond Shaedon's. Shaedon still needs to tighten that up, but it's better than it was last year. He really couldn't get anywhere with it. But they're watching him, man, and don't be surprised when you look up at the end of the season, he's averaging like 21, 6, and 4, and you're going, oh,
that's a 20-year-old.
That's a 20-year-old doing this, and on good splits. Like, and it's going to be they got a nice little backcourt over there. Toumani Camara is a terrorist, an absolute terrorist, and I love him. Like, if I had a daughter, I wanted to marry him. He's a wonderful man, and it is a privilege to watch him play basketball. He is a 23-year-old rookie who, he makes life living hell. I said I talked to some opposing players. Without naming them, I've talked to 4 different starting point guards in the NBA who all had some version of F that guy. He is a nightmare to play against. It is not Chauncey Billups who's like, hey, I want you to go out there and pressure him. It is built into his brain. He's like, I'm going to go ahead and pick up full length, and I'm going to wear you like a trench coat for 40 minutes. Have fun.
I love that.
And he's doing it. He's every bit of 6'7". And Ryan, there's guys who move well for their size, and then there's guys that just move. Like Michael Porter Jr. is a guy who moves well for his size. Like, you're like, oh, that dude moves well for 6'10". Toumani moves well for anyone. He stays in a stance down low and doesn't slow down.
Just wild.
You just don't like. There's like I've compared him to Raja Bell. I don't know if you watched Raja at all in his prime.
A little bit.
He just like he was like a snake. He just he would stay low and just stay with you no matter what. And Tumani has real defensive. Like I hate how everybody says, "Well, defense is it's a lot of it's mostly just how much you care." No, it's not. It's defensive talent. Because there's plenty of guys in the league who care. If you went and told somebody, hey, you can go make $10 million a year if you just care a lot, there would be a lot more great defenders in the league. And that's just not the case. Tumani he is a talented defender. And he's always turned up to 11, and he's instigated, I want to say, probably about a half dozen technicals already.
Love that. That's
like guys want to fight him every single night, and it's amazing. I love him for it.
He's exactly the guy, especially that you want next to a couple of scorers, whether they're Simons and Shaedon and guys like that. He can take the pressure off.
He's a bass
cross match. Like he's a perfect guy.
Plays him 3, plays him 4.
Mix and match into what you're doing. Now there are some things that he's going to have to improve on, especially on the offensive end. But like people have to remember, he's a rookie. Like this is the time to kind of improve on that. So
he hits 36% from 3. I don't need plus. Give me league average 36% from 3. Stay on the floor, buddy. You're not coming off.
Love that, and I think that is in his future. I think
I'm willing to bet that he number 1 makes all rookie, because I think people who vote are going to look back and go, well, he was like 6th in scoring. How the hell did he get there? He was like 4th in rebounding, and he's clearly the best defender in this not named Chet or Victor. So yeah, he's going to make this team, and I genuinely think in his career he's going to make an all-defense team. Like he's that good of a defender.
I love that.
It's terrifying. Like I can't remember the last time I saw a rookie who was like just that savvy about stuff. And it's just like, you're supposed to be dumb. How are you this? I don't get it.
They're getting smarter getting into the league, man.
There's
are,
a lot man.
Not everybody, but like there's a lot of young guys.
Asar's another
really,
one.
Yeah.
Asar's got like that natural defensive talent to just be there at the right place. And you're just like, you're a child. You're not supposed to have any comprehension of this.
Tumani Kamara, NBA terrorist. I'll remember that one for a while. That's good.
I love it. That's
good. Last one I have here for you. What's the next kind of macro goal for this team? If you had to pick one thing that you were hoping the team would work on over the course of, let's say, these next 6 weeks or so, what would you hope that they accomplish?
Simons and DA. They need to see what they have with that. They need to figure that out. That's the thing. I don't think you're going to see a ton of changes to this team. I don't think you're going to see Jeremy Grant traded at the deadline.
Interesting.
I think if it happens, anything can change, but I think he's going to be I think he's genuinely happy here. I mean, I don't know if you interacted with him in Denver. Like Jeremy's a great dude. Like one of my favorite guys to talk to. He's happy here. He's got a kid. Other than the fact that he just picked up his 4th concussion, he's great. Yeah, poor guy just got the
poor guy. I'm a football guy, so I understand what that means. Like, that's a lot.
He got his brain scrambled. But Simons DA just have had. I want to say that they've Ant Simons and DA have played 4 minutes together this season.
Not enough.
Yeah, and it's like cool. Can we see what that looks like when they're? Oh, sorry, Ant Sharpe, Simon Sharpe, DA, and Grant have played 4 minutes together. So it's one of those things. It's like, can we see what it looks like with the 4 best offensive players on the floor?
Yeah,
please. That'd be cool.
Then kind of see where Scoot kind of fills into that. Like that's where the balance kind of comes into. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have to be in there immediately, but like you talked about, this is Simon's team. This is like the primary pick and roll partner with MNDA and a couple of awesome wings in Shaedon Sharpe and Jeremy Grant. Like that's how you got to build it. And I think they've got a good pulse on that. I haven't seen anything otherwise from this team. Like it feels like a well-run group that knows that they have to be patient and understand that the long game is where it's at.
Yeah, and then at the trade deadline, I imagine they'll move on from Brogdon. That'll free up some additional minutes for Scoot to kind of either play with Ant or play with Shaedon. Makes things easier to kind of figure the other stuff out, and then steer into the skid perhaps one more time for the end of the season. Like right now, they're on pace for 24 wins.
Yeah,
I was just gonna say when we recorded the first time, I said they were going to win 24 games. So
sounds about right. Hey. somebody seems to know what they're talking about. It's crazy. It's crazy.
I stumble into it. I just fall into it.
He is Danny Marang of the Jack Ramsey's podcast and hosting for the Portland Trailblazers here. Danny, thank you so much for hopping on, man. Let's talk again in 6 weeks, all right?
Absolutely, brother. Take care.